Hi, this is Robert Colqhoun, Director of International Campaigns.
Por la vida en Colombia está lleno de frutos.
Geschlossen und manche dann sagen, ja, es ist nicht mehr selbst.
People start saying that, if your thoughts fall foul of the popular opinion, that they're somehow criminal.
Mi hija ha decidido no abortar.
Our freedom in a democracy, in our open society, begins with the freedom of speech.
Ante todo, los pilares de 40 días, ¿no? La oración, el ayuno, la loca.
So sometimes it's just a little thing that we have to do. So
también dignidad, que son creados también por
But
Dios.
Beyond what we say, anything we do at 40 Days for Life, anything we say to defend the unborn, we do with love.
Los bebés no tienen que ser abortados de una madre.
40 Days for Life International Podcast.
El podcast de 40 días por la vida internacional.
Well, hello and welcome to the 40 Days for Life International Podcast. It's a joy and honour. My name is Robert Colqhoun. I'm the Director of International Campaigns for 40 Days for Life. It's a joy and honour to have pro-life leader Father Frank A. Pavone on the podcast this week. He's one of the most prominent pro-life leaders in the world. Originally from New York, he was ordained a priest in 1988 by Cardinal John O'Connor, and he's dedicated his entire life and ministry to ending abortion. So he was started in 1993 as Director of Priests for Life, and under his leadership became the largest Catholic organisation focused on ending abortion. And he's also the president of the Pro-Life Religious Council, the national past director of Silent No More Awareness, Rachel's Vineyard, and he travels throughout the country preaching and teaching against abortion, broadcasting daily to hundreds through television, radio and online programmes. The Vatican's appointed him Pontifical Academy for Life and Pontifical Council for the Family. He was also involved heavily with the Terry Schiavo case, and has served on pro-life and Catholic advisory boards, both on election campaigns and being the national co-chair of the Pro-Life Voices for Trump. He's the author of 4 books: Ending Abortion, Not Just Fighting It, Pro-Life Reflections for Every Day, Abolishing Abortion, and Proclaiming the Message of Life. He also helped to welcome Norman McCorvey, who was behind the original Roe versus Wade abortion decision, into the Catholic Church too. So he's been praised by many church leaders, some of whom have also tried to cancel him as well. Frank, it's absolutely wonderful to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's a real privilege honour to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
Well, hello, Robert. I'm fine. It's a delight to be with you. We were together in person not too long ago at the 40 Days for Life Symposium. It was great to see you again, together with all those that labor with us in front of those abortion facilities. So I've been looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and it was great to see you. Great to see you in Nashville, and also the previous year in Florida as well. So thank you so much for coming to our international symposium. We have a lot of our leaders there, and I'd just love to hear your experience. You've got decades of experience in the pro-life ministry. How did you first get involved in pro-life ministry as a priest? And how did you get involved in the pro-life movement? And what gives you zeal and passion for this work?
My call to the priesthood and my call to the pro-life movement happened at the very same time. They were intertwined from the beginning. I was a senior in high school, and I went to public schools. I wasn't even going to a Catholic school or a Christian school. And yet, the reality of the issue came front and center when I went to the March for Life in 1976. It was the 3rd annual March for Life here in the United States. And it was a bus was going from our town, and my mom and my grandmother were planning to go. So they asked me if I wanted to come. So I said yes. Seeing that crowd, diverse, unhindered by bitter cold temperatures, joyful, even though we were facing the most tragic and sad reality in history, the reality of abortion. All of that inspired me, and just the pure size of the crowd, which then was only a fraction of what we get now. But the whole thing inspired me. So at the very same time, I was rediscovering my faith, the scriptures, prayer, the Eucharist, the Mass, all these elements that I'd been raised on in the Catholic faith were just becoming more and more real to me. And all of this happened at the same time, so that by the end of my senior year, I had been introduced to the pro-life movement, and I was so attracted to the idea of ministering the gospel that I applied to seminary right after high school. So that's how it all got started. The zeal and passion for doing this work comes from three things. First, union with God in prayer. We all have to be rooted in our faith and our relationship with God, our relationship with Christ, who, as he said, is the way, the truth, and the life, is what will constantly keep us zealous for this cause. Secondly, history. Thinking about people like William Wilberforce, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, the parallels between the pro-life movement and other movements for human rights are so clear. And the more you explore them, the more convincing and persuasive it becomes that we are on the right side of history, and that we're just like all these other leaders in the sense of the challenges we face, the obstacles we have to overcome, the feeling sometimes that, we're not making much impact, or what are we really doing? They all went through the same thing. The opposition that we get from others, so you put yourself always in a historical context. And then the third element of keeping that zeal and passion is simply going back to the sources and facing abortion head on. In other words, sometimes people will say, I don't need to see those graphic pictures, well, actually we do. And, I myself, I go back and look at, some of the old videos, Silent Scream, The Hard Truth, the pictures and the videos of aborted babies. That brings us to the reality of this. And then listening to the testimonies, and we'll talk about this more, our Silent No More campaign, where those who have had abortions share their stories. This brings us face to face with the horror of abortion. And part of preserving our zeal for this cause is always keeping ourselves connected with the physical and human reality of abortion, because Robert, it risks becoming an abstract issue otherwise.
Yeah, that's right.
And we can't maintain the zeal just based on abstractions and concepts. We got to always go back. And one of the things that 40 Days for Life does for people is, you're seeing these moms walk into these clinics. You're seeing them walk out. You're seeing the fathers of these babies sometimes pulling those moms in. That does the same thing. It's bringing you face to face. Not just face to face, but it's bringing you emotionally, physically into the reality of what this battle is about. And that in and of itself sustains our zeal and our passion for this cause.
Absolutely. That's a brilliant answer. And coming face to face with the reality of abortion, that is going to always keep us motivated, but also keeping us awake, spiritually awake, with the horror of abortion and then the desire to do something about it. And you've started a whole range of pro-life initiatives under different organizations, different names, a whole range of ministries. Firstly, which ones have been the most successful ministries and pro-life initiatives that you've launched? And secondly, just give us a kind of broad overrun of all the pro-life initiatives that come under Priests for Life, just as a summary.
It is a family of ministries, and one of the most successful and gratifying has been Silent No More. That we started, this was back on the 30th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. We wanted to do something new, something to give voice to the women that the other side always claims to be saving and serving. And Janet Morana, our executive director, and also the woman who heads up Anglicans for Life, Georgette Forney. The three of us got together. Georgette has had an abortion, and we formulated this effort to give a voice to those who've had abortions. Well, the campaign just took off. It was the right time for the right idea. And so many people who have indeed repented of their abortions, found healing, but have that further desire. And we see this in the Gospels, where people healed by Jesus want to go out and spread the word. They want to tell everybody because they're so excited. So it is with so many of these, not only the moms, but the dads and other family members who, having been through the bitter experience of abortion, nevertheless have found the peace, the grace, the healing of Christ. They want to tell others about it. And this has been so successful now. We have regional coordinators throughout the country. We have Silent No More Canada. We have Silent No More people in other parts of the world. And a beautiful partnership, as you know, by the way, between Silent No More and 40 Days for Life, because those that have had abortions, and they have their signs, I regret my abortion.
That's right.
They are very effective out in front of these abortion facilities. So that's been one of the most gratifying. Aside from that, we also do healing ministry through Rachel's Vineyard. It's a part of Priests for Life. It's the largest healing ministry in the world for those that have had abortions. And it consists of retreat weekends. And again, these take place in about 70 countries now. So that's been a very expansive ministry as well, started by Dr. Teresa and Kevin Burke, who are now full-time pastoral associates of Priests for Life. Then we've got it's simply our church activation branch of our ministry. So this is direct seminars with the clergy, whether in person or online, pastors of all denominations, actually. It's become an interdenominational educational effort, but we help them to preach on abortion. We have a lot of training about preaching, about leading people in prayer. We have great resources of pro-life prayers, which of course we also share with the 40 Days for Life teams. We've got ideas for mobilizing churches and doing parish activities, and the whole clergy outreach, Deacons for Life and also Seminarians for Life, all under our umbrella. Then we have a program of training in pro-life as a spirituality. It's not simply a cause, a movement, a political position. It is a spirituality. It flows from our faith, leads back to our faith, and our faith shapes how we do pro-life activities. So the compassion, the courage, etc. So we have this whole program. We call it the Missionaries of the Gospel of Life. Anyone can be trained in this pro-life spirituality. Then we have the whole aspect of our work under the aegis of Dr. Alveda King, who heads up this outreach, first of all, to the Black community, but then beyond that, an outreach that asserts, it's called Civil Rights for the Unborn. It asserts that the civil rights movement of today is the pro-life movement. And who would know better than the niece of Martin Luther King Jr.? So it's a great privilege to have her as part of the team. Then we've got a legislative outreach. We do lobbying. We're working against these pro-abortion ballot initiatives now in various states that are trying to change the constitutions to allow for a right to abortion. We do lobbying on the federal and state and local level. And then we do political activity, educating voters, educating parishes into what they can do for elections, registering voters, mobilizing voters, educating candidates, helping candidates talk about the issue. We then have, Robert, an entire broadcasting ministry. It's called endabortion.tv. We have a range of programs that we broadcast every day, and connected with that, a very broad social media outreach. And on those social media platforms, people can see the broadcast programs, but the programs also go out to other platforms and video sharing platforms, etc. We have a publishing division at Priests for Life. So most of our pastoral team have also authored various books. And then we have a whole outreach of a prayer campaign. So we have regular prayer campaigns during the year, sometimes connected with the different liturgical seasons of the year and so forth. Finally, on the international level, Priests for Life is very active. We are, for example, an NGO at the United Nations, non-governmental organization. So we get to be in the meetings and advocate for the unborn when Planned Parenthood goes in there and tries to advocate for a worldwide right to abortion. Fortunately, they have not succeeded in getting the other nations to agree to an international right to abortion, but that's what they're constantly trying to do, and we're always there to counter that. We're also a registered group, it's called a civic society organization, down at the Organization of American States. It's sort of like another international body like the UN, but it's more in Latin America. We work with the Holy See Mission to the United Nations, the Pope's outreach to the UN. We have constantly served them and helped them or collaborated with them. And then we're at work in various other countries, and Marie Smith oversees that. Marie's husband, by the way, is Congressman Chris Smith, who is one of our key pro-life heroes in the United States Congress. So that, in a kind of a big nutshell, is the whole family of ministries that Priests for Life has developed. We also have youth outreach, Hispanic outreach, a number of other things. Yeah. But that's in a nutshell what we do.
Wow, that's a lot. Certainly a busy man. So if I've traveled to about 40 countries with 40 Days for Life and visiting local campaigns. If you're a church in another country and you're interested in pro-life ministry, you've got a whole range of resources for priests, for seminarians, for pastors, for deacons already. You know, I mean, it's all there kind of for the taking. It's and have you had much success in other countries in reaching other people and sharing your ministry in different countries?
Yes, you know, we've had great support internationally. For example, in Austria, Cardinal Schönborn has started an Austrian branch of Priests for Life. He had me come in and speak to all his clergy. We've done the same in Ireland and a number of other countries where we've been able to come in person and share this vision that, you know, the church should be the first responder when it comes to abortion, and certainly one of the most powerful responses, because we've got this incredible network of communication and people coming every day into the churches and every week in even greater numbers. So yes, individual priests and bishops from around the world make use of our resources and share them with their clergy. And this is, one of the things that makes this easy, of course, is the Catholic Church has this unity worldwide, whereby, for example, in every Catholic church in the world, the same scriptures are being proclaimed each Sunday. So what does that mean? Now, I wrote a book taking the readings of each of the Sundays of the year and showing how a preacher would develop a pro-life message from those readings. And so automatically, because of the way the church is structured, that's valid in all these other countries, and people can take that, and some have translated our work, of course, but they can take that and find it just as useful wherever they are in the world if they want to address the tragedy of abortion. So it is an international fight, as you well know, and we're happy to be part of it on a global scale.
That's right. Well, I'm a Catholic convert, and I was also a seminarian for a few years. So I've got a great interest in your ministry, especially reaching out to the church. And this, abortion is the civil rights issue of our age, leading cause of deaths worldwide. You were at the bedside of Terry Schiavo. So just for our listeners who don't know who Terry Schiavo is and was, if you could just give a kind of brief introduction to that story, and then the role that you played in a pastoral and priestly role in that whole issue. I think that was in Florida, wasn't it? So
a Florida woman who suffered a brain injury. We don't know how she incurred that injury, but what ended up happening was that her husband, Michael, who initially was caring for her together with her parents and her siblings, decided at a certain point that he did not want to continue that care. In fact, he wanted her to die. So Michael became alienated from the rest of Terry's family. Unfortunately, he gained control over her medical decision-making. And his decision for her medical treatment was that there should be no treatment. So what ended up happening was she didn't get the rehabilitation to allow her to speak and to walk, and she wasn't unresponsive. She was very responsive, and I'll tell you more about that. But Michael said, no, we do not want any rehabilitative care. And then he took the further step, and this is where most people pull their hair out and they say, how can this be? He took the further step to get an order from the court not to even give her any food or water. Now, let's look at this from common sense. Not giving a person food and water is the same thing as starving and dehydrating the person, which is the same thing as murdering the person. I mean, it's like food and water is not medical treatment. Food and water is food and water. It's basic care, right? But Michael actually got the American court system, and when I say system, I mean all the way up to the Supreme Court,
Wow.
to back up his decision. And this woman then literally was starved and dehydrated to death. Now, as this battle was progressing over the course of years, it was over the course of a decade and a half, of course, it started to get some attention. And the family was looking for support, and they saw me on my broadcasts talking about pro-life and whatnot. Priests for Life was growing. This was in like around the year 2000 now that the family reached out to me and said, we think you can help us. Can you spread the word about Terry? We want to bring pressure, it was public support. So I got involved at the family's request, and we did spread the word about Terry. And then I ended up being on a very short list of people who were approved to go into her room, because this thing became so contentious that the courts actually limited the number of people who could even go into her room. And there were police officers guarding the door to her room. And it was just so absurd. So I went in her room, and I was able to see during her final days, even during her final hours, I was able to see the reality of what was going on, because the other side was trying to say, peaceful, dignified death, death with dignity. It was ugly. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't peaceful. It was violent. And she was like frozen in this look of horror and fear and sadness. Her eyes were darting back and forth. This was like after 2 weeks of not having any nutrition. It was just it was horrifying. And on those last days, the police officers were actually standing around her bed. It was like the crucifixion scene. It was like, there's only one other thing that compares to it in terms of how it felt. And it's something you know very well, and all of our 40 Days friends know very well. It's that feeling of standing in front of that building, knowing that baby killing is happening on the other side of that wall, seeing the women walk in and feeling like the force of the law standing there, and sometimes police officers, security guards, and everything, standing there, instead of protecting life, protecting murder. And it's like, it's so offensive to the human mind and the human heart. It's like, how can this be? This is a completely upside down. And there's only two places where you get that feeling: standing in front of an abortion facility while the abortions are happening, and standing at the bedside of Terri Schiavo while a court order is being enforced. You can't even give her a drop of water. It's the same. It's really the same thing, isn't it? It's the culture of death enforced by law to protect what is insanity. It's insanity.
Crazy. And we've had similar cases in England with Charlie Gard and Alfie Evans, and you also helped baby Joseph as well, who was a similar story. It was a Canadian baby and then came to the United States, and you were pivotal in helping with actually provide medical care. What happened in that story, and what role did you play?
In a similar way, the family reached out to us. The baby just needed a tracheotomy, nothing extraordinary. The hospital in Canada wouldn't give it to him. And so what we did, once we got involved, we put public pressure on that hospital in Canada to release the baby. We said, look, you guys don't want to do it? All right, that's your business. Give the baby to us. We'll find a hospital in the United States, which we did, Cardinal Glennon Hospital in St. Louis. And we said, we'll bring the baby there. We'll take it from here. So the hospital at first would not release the baby, but then we were able to generate so much public pressure that finally, literally, Robert, they called in the middle of the night and they said, okay, come up and get the baby. We had a medical services jet volunteer their services. And I went up at midnight to Canada with the baby's father, and we were in a little plane, and they finally brought the baby out, and we took him to St. Louis that night, and he ended up getting the surgery that he needed. Now, he didn't survive very long because the parents knew he had this degenerative genetic disease, which interestingly, they already had another child lost to the same disease. So the parents knew, eyes were wide open that, hey, this baby's not going to live very long. But the point is two things. They wanted to do everything they could for their child, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, they wanted the child to be with them at home. And we were able to grant both of those desires of these parents and help them give their child the treatment that that child deserved. So that was the baby Joseph story. And the other cases you mentioned, by the way, I was also happy to be an advocate in both of those cases, Charlie and Alfie. And, you know, it's sad when these situations arise. I think what's hopeful about it is the fact that these cases do generate such international attention. The fact that they're generating so much attention shows that there is still enough of a moral
compass,
discomfort, right, on the part of people to say, hey, this is something newsworthy. We don't want to get to the point where this is, I mean, we know it is happening much more than we hear about, but we don't want to get to the point where it's just so completely normalized that it's not news anymore.
Yeah, well, the case of Charlie Gard, the hospital didn't grant permission for the baby to go to Italy, so which was absolutely tragic. But that was not the case in baby Joseph, that you were able to help, and baby was allowed to go at home and spend time with the family, which was beautiful. Tell us your relationship with Norma McCorvey, who was the plaintiff in the Roe versus Wade case, and she actually, you know, this is the case that legalized abortion in America. 1973, and her personal story is fascinating because you helped her be received into the Catholic Church. So the very woman whose case, you know, which was, you know, real lie in the court, but this was the case that brought abortion into America. She actually had a conversion, became a Catholic. So what? Tell us about that relationship and kind of extraordinary her personal circumstances in light of her being the plaintiff.
You know, it was about 20 years after Roe v. Wade, Norma McCorvey met my friend Flip Benham. The Reverend Flip Benham out in Dallas, where Norma lived, was head of Operation Rescue. So he was praying out in front of the abortion facility where Norma was actually an employee. And through their interaction and through the kindness that Reverend Flip showed to Norma and the kindness of the pro-life people to Norma, she began to soften. She began to listen to them. And ultimately, she agreed to go to church with them. She accepted Christ. And once you accept Christ, I mean, everything starts to change, including your views on pro-life. And so Norma, and this was 1995, I remember I had already started as full-time director of Priests for Life. That started in 93. So I'm in my office one day and I get a fax from Flip Benham, actually from one of his team members, saying, Norma is going to be baptized tonight, you know, and I still have the fax. Norma's going to be baptized. So I said, wow, this is unbelievable, the Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade. So that's when I started to get to know her. I flew out to Dallas, and, you know, I'm traveling all the time. I'm on the road like 80% of the time. So I go through Dallas regularly, and I would meet with Norma, you know, as we came through Dallas. She had already declared at that point in 1995 that she was pro-life, that she rejected her, and she repented of her role in the Roe v. Wade case, and she wanted to see Roe v. Wade overturned. So she began working full-time in the pro-life movement, and then she began working with me and my team. We did a lot of things together. And as time went on, in those first few years that I knew her, she started asking me questions about the Catholic faith. And I never pushed her in one direction or another. I was just you know, interested in affirming her and working together with her against abortion. But she did ask me, one time she asked me, Father Frank, is there such a thing as a born-again Catholic? I said, yes, of course, yes, because she had been hearing from Flip and everybody about, well, you got to be born again, you got to be born again. And she had accepted that. She said, can you be a born-again Catholic? I said, absolutely. So eventually she said, you know, I want to come into the Catholic Church. So I facilitated that. Her Father Ed Robinson was the priest that gave her he was local there in Dallas, so he gave her the day-to-day instructions. And then in 1998, Father Robinson and I together did the ceremony where we received Norma into the Catholic Church. And she was a strong advocate for life ever since. And by the way, Robert, you probably saw, as many of our listeners saw, towards a few years after she passed away, there was this, she passed away in 2017. There was this documentary that came out trying to say that she had changed her mind. Absolutely false, completely misleading, totally exaggerated. I was in contact with her up until literally the day she died, and I have texts on my phone from those very days. She did not change her mind at all. She was a temperamental, you know, she could get angry, including at pro-life people, but she was committed to the end of her life to reversing that decision, which she was so sad, bore her name, and led to results that she never envisioned, the killing of tens of millions of babies.
Extraordinary. Well, beautiful that she had a conversion, and how extraordinary that, you know, the person whose name was behind the introduction of Roe versus Wade had a personal conversion and turned to Christ. And tell us, how have you personally dealt with the challenges of with conducting a pro-life apostolate as a priest? And obviously, you know, being a priest, you've got you're in the church, you've got a bishop, etc., and you're welcomed by Cardinal O'Connor. Start a pro-life ministry, and then the bishop changes, and then you know, the church in America, some bits liberal, some bits conservative. How have you navigated all of those challenges from religious authority with having a pro-life ministry in the Catholic Church, when, you know, abortion is a controversial issue, and then you've got to navigate the waters of the politics of the church, etc. How have you dealt with the challenges and overcome those challenges, and how does that affect your work?
Yes, you bring out a number of important dynamics that people need to consider. First of all, any kind of pro-life ministry, any ministry focused on abortion, and of course, you know this, it's true with 40 Days for Life, it's true with everything. Because we're dealing with such an explosive issue, there's going to be all kinds of criticism coming from all directions, all kinds of persecution, because people don't want to be pricked in their conscience about abortion. You know, it's easier to fight against, you know, to bear witness about the evil of the Holocaust, because nobody today is operating gas chambers. You know, so we can say, oh yeah, oh how evil that was, how evil that was. And, you know, you'd be pretty well received, you know, if you create a whole ministry based around how evil the Holocaust was. But because this is happening here and now, because so many people are complicit in it, it evokes a very strong reaction. Anyone who does pro-life work knows that, for starters.
100%.
The second dynamic, like you point out, is when you're a priest, and when you're doing this within the Catholic Church, you're dealing with a very hierarchical structure. And that's both a plus and a minus, in the sense that if those who are in charge get a little, you know, nervous because you're becoming very big and very influential, they don't want to be overshadowed. And I'm not saying this necessarily in a bad way. I mean, they have their role. You know, the bishops are the, you know, in charge of the priests, right? So some priest comes along and says, oh, I got an international ministry called Priests for Life. You know, the bishop is saying, well, okay, well, what's my role in this? You know? and the way that we were structured from the beginning, and many ministries are structured this way, is that we have our own board. So we kind of govern ourselves. And, you know, just because a ministry is a Catholic ministry or is in union with the church, that doesn't mean that it's governed by the bishops. And a lot of the faithful miss that point. It doesn't mean it's governed by the bishops. You can have independent organizations, entities, corporations, ministries that, yes, they're in union with the church, but they have their own governance. So that's Priests for Life. And then we had our own, and we still have our own funding. So it's not like we're getting money from the bishops. You know, whoever's giving the money, you know, how's that saying go? Whoever pays the piper dictates the tune, you know. But they don't fund us. So it's like, okay, people out there, it's like 40 Days for Life. Again, people out there who like the work that we're doing, they're going to give us the support necessary to keep doing it. Okay, so given all of this, Priests for Life started to get very big very fast. So after just, I guess it was 6 or 7 years that I was doing this, I started to get a little bit of pushback from the bishops. One bishop that I was under in New York said, this is the one who came after Cardinal O'Connor, said, I want you back in the parish. And that's where the battle started. That was in 2001. And I say the battle because, you know, on the one hand, people say, oh, well, you know, priests are supposed to be obedient and whatnot. Yes, that's true. But bishops are supposed to be responsible. And you're responsible for looking at the big picture. And it's like, here was a growing, successful pro-life ministry, and that I had requested it. I wasn't given the ministry. I requested it in conscience. And many of our viewers will understand this because they have the the same calling. In conscience, I came to the point where I knew I had to devote my entire life in ministry to protecting the unborn from abortion. And so I went to the church authorities humbly saying, may I do this? Because I believe this is what the Lord is calling me to do. And the church said yes. Cardinal O'Connor said yes. Pope John Paul II blessed my ministry, and on and on. We got a lot of support. We still have a lot of support. But some of the bishops got nervous. This is getting too big, too influential. We got to pull Father Frank back. And for 20 years, Robert, it's a long story, but for 20 years, various bishops tried to start to block and impede my work. Pope Benedict supported me. Even Pope Francis supported me as well, because we had to appeal multiple times to the Vatican to say, hey, listen, just tell me what am I doing something wrong? You know, if I just want to save the unborn, we know the church is committed to that. What's the problem? And they kept giving different excuses. Those that are opposed to us, you know, they're never honest. They're never honest. They'll make up one excuse, and then when you fulfill their demands, they'll change the goalpost and they'll make up another complaint, another excuse. And the whole history of this is one long litany of these things back and forth. So finally, some of these bishops convinced Pope Francis, hey, we're not getting control of this guy. We're not getting control of Priests for Life. They tried to take over our board. They tried to do all kinds of crazy things, and they didn't succeed. They couldn't silence me. They couldn't stop Priests for Life. They couldn't remove me from Priests for Life because, again, it's the board of Priests for Life that decides who the national director is, not the bishop, not even the Pope. So finally, the only thing they could do to try to blunt my influence was to remove me from the priesthood altogether. And so they took that drastic step in December of 2022, and it just set off an international firestorm where people, evangelicals, Catholics, and even Jewish people who support us are scratching their heads saying, what's the matter? Is the church not in favor of pro-life anymore? Why are you taking the most visible priest and the most successful ministry within the Catholic Church and doing this to them? And to this day, of course, they've been able to answer that question. But the beautiful news is our supporters keep supporting us. My board continues to stand with me behind my leadership. I still lead Priests for Life, even though I'm not a priest. You know, you don't have to be a priest to lead the organization. So it's
the priesthood of all believers.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, the answer really, how do you navigate this? And everyone needs to take this own lesson into their own lives. Be faithful to the call that God has given you. Be humble. Listen, maybe there is something you're doing wrong that you need to correct. I always take that attitude. Listen, I'm not, you know, we all make mistakes. We're all sinners. We all fumble and bumble and do things wrong. Teach me, lead me, correct me. Absolutely. But don't ask me to be unfaithful to the calling that God has placed on my life. And that's the key lesson. We got to be faithful to who we are and who God has called us to be.
Well, we've got a PhD in persecution in England. You know, not only a national ban of prayer vigils outside abortion centres. We've had 3 of our leaders taken to court. So I know very well that when you're doing God's work, and especially on abortion, it's like you know, this is a controversial topic. It comes with all the kind of firepower and the kickback that you've experienced. And my experience has always been, you know, when you're over the target, you know, that's when you're getting the sort of kickback and the persecution. So if we're not being persecuted, I'd have to examine my conscience and go, what's going wrong? So
Right.
Yeah, but you started a religious order for like pro-life ministry, and then what did you learn about that experience? And that, you know, that lasted for a few years. Was that the case? And you had like seminarians and people training to be priests, and then like a seminary. And how did that go? And what did you learn from that experience? As a former seminarian, I was really interested in that project.
Yes, one of the bishops who is on our advisory board wanted to do this with us, do an experiment and forming some kind of a community. Cardinal O'Connor had formed the Sisters of Life, so religious sisters dedicated to protecting the unborn. So I said, well, could we see if could be something like this for priests? So we did try that. 2 things I learned. Number one, if you're going to start a community like that, it is a lifelong task that demands full-time attention. But then what we learned too, as we navigated all the requirements of canon law, was that we learned that we were actually already on the right path with the structure we had with Priests for Life. In other words, we are not a community. We are a ministry where priests can join. Even to this day, we have priests on our team. They get permission to work with us, but they live in their own places, in their own parishes or wherever they might be. And we just have the freedom, of course, to go where we need to go to meet the demands of the pro-life movement. So that structure, which we had from the beginning, proved to be the right structure. As we were trying to experiment, and it was an experiment right from the beginning, as to should we form a community for priests, we realized we were kind of putting a square peg in a round hole. It wasn't exactly what the pro-life movement needed. Our priority always was, what are the needs of the pro-life movement? And the other thing we learned was, you know what, this is kind of an ad hoc setup. In other words, we just want to end abortion. We don't necessarily want to create something like, you look at the Franciscans, the Jesuits, this is going to go on, for hundreds and hundreds of years. We don't need to necessarily create something that's going to go on for hundreds of years. We need to, we're like an emergency task force. We need to solve the immediate problem. We've got a Holocaust going on that we need to end. And so that came across to me after we did that experiment, didn't quite work out. I said, thank you, Lord, for, first of all, we don't leave no stone unturned. And in good conscience, we had to try it because we didn't want to feel later in life that, we could have done this and we didn't even try. You got to get in there and try. The poem, The Man in the Arena, it's not the one who succeeds all the time. It's the one who goes in there, you try, whether you succeed or fail, you have the peace of mind to know that you made every effort. But we're fine. We have the structure that we need. And, we're going to continue until abortion is ended.
That's brilliant. Well, it's fascinating to hear, you try different initiatives and some are successful and some, don't address the need. It sounds like it's a reinventing the wheel. You already had priests and you already had the opportunity for them to serve in missions. So, setting up something like the Jesuits and the Benedictines, it's like that's one step too far. But it's now 3 years since Roe versus Wade has come to an end in the United States, and fascinating to hear what was going on at the National Conference a few weeks ago. What gives you hope in post-Roe America, and where do you see grassroots of hope? Just to give some context for our international listeners and readers, some states are abortion free and other states have become more liberal since that ruling. You travel all around the country, so you've got a very much a statewide perspective and in different places. What gives you hope in America right now for the pro-life movement?
Yeah, the hope is very simple. The Dobbs decision opened up the debate. It leveled the playing field. What Roe was doing was blocking the will of the people. When states wanted to protect the unborn, the courts would strike down those laws. Now it's an open playing field. The court has backed away and said, listen, if the people and their elected representatives, and which, by the way, applies not just to the states, but also to the federal Congress, they too have an open door now with the Supreme Court to protect the unborn if they so choose. But whatever the people and their elected officials want to do, the court is saying there's no constitutional reason to stop them from protecting the unborn. So that by itself gives a great deal of hope, because we have more payoff for the very same work that we've been doing. We just have to continue doing, which is elect pro-life candidates, craft pro-life laws, get them passed, and then enforce them. So more of that is happening. More of that is happening. Now, what it also is part of the hope is that it opens up the conversation. When people invoke a constitutional right to abortion, whether they're invoking that in a courtroom, in a legislative assembly, or just in a conversation between citizens, it tends to shut down debate. Who wants to, interfere with a constitutional right? So it sort of ends the discussion. But now, since the court said, no, there is no federal constitutional right, the court basically said to the people, have the debate. Persuade one another. That's the way it's supposed to work in America. Don't leave it to us 9 justices to sort this out. Persuade one another. Use every resource you've got. And my confidence has always been, we have the winning message. We have the more persuasive message on the pro-life side. The other side, you just look at their behavior. They want to put abortion front and center, Okay, except that they don't want to discuss abortion. So they step on the gas and the brakes at the same time. Oh, right to abortion. We've got public officials here in the United States now doing this reproductive rights tour. Vice president goes to an abortion facility. It's crazy. They want to bring a spotlight on the issue of abortion, but then if you ask them to describe an abortion, never. They'll never ask them to show an abortion on TV. Never. They won't even admit what it is. So as the debate unfolds, the hypocrisy of the other side becomes clearer and clearer, and they just prove by their total inability to make a case for abortion, they just prove that they are on the wrong side of this issue. So that's my hope going forward. Dobbs' decision has just opened the door wide. Now it's up to us to go through it.
And so where were you when the Roe versus Wade decision, I think it was a Friday, how did you celebrate it being overturned? And what's the next battleground? You've got all these, states sort of voting. There's one in Florida coming up. How did you celebrate it? And what's now the next battleground?
I was in a great place. I was actually at the National Right to Life Convention. So I was surrounded by pro-life activists around the country. And I was doing a live broadcast. So I was in front of camera, just like we are now. And my executive director was here at where I'm sitting now in Florida. I was in the National Right to Life conference. And we were broadcasting live because we knew that some decisions were coming out. We didn't know which ones. But so we were able to announce it literally just seconds after it was issued. We were able to announce the good news live that Roe had been overturned. Now, of course, we have, as you mentioned, in various states and for people's knowledge, proposed amendments to put a right to abortion in the state constitution. So we're fighting this in Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, New York, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, Nebraska, and South Dakota. So right now, we are pointing out to people that all of these amendments, first of all, they take away from the people the right to protect the unborn. So they're going completely contrary to what the Supreme Court said in the Dobbs decision. It said, work out the debate. There's no constitutional right for this. Even the Dobbs decision said even state constitutions have never recognized the right to abortion. So you see what the other side is trying to do.
Yeah.
By forcing a right to abortion back into the Constitution, they want to evade the debate on abortion. That's not going to work. Some of these amendments will pass. Hopefully some of them we can stop. But they're not going to work ultimately because, first of all, they're too extreme. And the American people have never supported abortion without limits. Never. So they're going to backfire. They're going to realize it's too extreme, and then the people are going to change these things. But also what's too extreme is when people realize that, the process has been taken out of their hands altogether. It's like, no. We, the people, want to decide. So, but that is the immediate battle in the states that I mentioned, and that's the strategy of the other side. It's actually a sign of not of their strength, but of their weakness, because they can't endure the spotlight of public debate, legislative debate. They can't deal with that. They just want to have a dogma coming from on high. Oh, it's a constitutional right, And then, like I said before, then that shuts down debate, makes it easy for them. They don't want to do the hard work of actually persuading people that abortion's a good thing.
And it's just for us on, living in other countries, it's kind of mind blowing that, Texas has, heartbeat law, that, it's pretty much a pro-life states in so many different places. This is kind of unimaginable in, Western Europe, secular Europe. This is kind of mind blowing, and hence the kind of crazy reaction we had from our politicians when Roe versus Wade was overturned. Can you shine some light on that? That the sky hasn't fallen in, and actually, Texas, the abortion rate has plummeted in that time. There's so many signs of hope, and it's very, very positive for the pro-life movement. What does that look like for people, in Western Europe, who this is kind of unimaginable to happen in our countries?
Yeah, it has worked out fine. Tens of thousands of more children have been born. Tens of thousands of women, of course, have been spared the lifelong regret of abortion. But society hasn't fallen apart. You know, these states that we have 14 states that protect the unborn right from the beginning of their lives, the conception.
Amazing.
And,
Yeah.
you know, those states haven't fallen apart. People haven't, you know, rebelled. We don't have women dying in the streets. And in fact, women in America can still get abortions. This is where, you know, they are traveling to other states. We know that. And those that want to do that, I mean, a lot of times the law will in fact deter people from having an abortion, and they'll find another way forward with the help of us in the pro-life movement. But some will travel and they'll get abortions elsewhere, and that kind of takes the weight off of the argument that the other side tries to make, that, oh, you know, well, you're going to ban abortion and it's not going to be available. It is available, sadly, but in reality, it is available in America. So no, it's been very it's proven to be very doable, you know, to actually protect these children. And at the same time, one of the ways it's been doable also is that together with these laws, like the one in Texas, the one here in Florida that recently passed, protecting babies starting at 6 weeks, these laws don't just ban abortion. They bring with them millions and millions of dollars of funding for alternatives to abortion, the pregnancy centers, prenatal care, you know, adoption services, all kinds of funds to make it easier for moms to have their babies. And that's a piece of the puzzle that often gets ignored by those who object to these laws.
Absolutely, and that's really inspiring to hear. And what message do you have for our 40 Days for Life international leaders and volunteers? You were one of the pro-life leaders in the United States when 40 Days for Life was first launched as an idea by David B. Wright and Sean Carney. You were fully behind it and mentioned to other pro-life leaders, and they go, oh, that's interesting. But you fully supported 40 Days, saw the power of prayer, how important that was. What do you have for a message for our leaders who live outside of the United States? You know, we live in various countries where some have pro-life laws, some have extreme pro-abortion laws. Today,
I'm delighted to be able to encourage all those that are part of 40 Days for Life. As you said, I mean, I saw the power of this right from the very beginning. I was thinking along exactly the same lines as the founders of 40 Days, and because I had been traveling and praying in front of abortion facilities for decades, and I saw the thirst. You know what the thirst was that people had was for something more organized. You know, people would come out often on their own, or maybe with this or that group. People had the time was right, and people wanted that sense of an organized movement, and 40 Days certainly brought that to them. So we save lives when we go out there. It's like a mathematical formula of certainty. You go out there, bear witness at those places, you are saving lives. And that's what counts above everything else. No matter what the obstacles are, you going there, you are responding to the rights of that baby and to the rights of God. A story illustrating this, one of the times I was praying at an abortion mill here in the States, one of the men had his feet, just his toes, over the property line, and they noticed it. So the abortion clinic representative comes out yelling and screaming, "Get your feet off our property!" So I was leading the prayers, and I stopped and I looked at them and I said, "And when are you going to get your hands off God's property?" When we go out there, and we are not just defending the rights of these babies, we are defending the rights of their creator, our creator. Brothers and sisters, I speak to you directly. Let nothing deter you from doing that. You will save lives. You'll be witnessing to the kingdom of God, the rights of God himself, and you do the Lord's work, the Lord is going to protect you, and he will bring success to our efforts.
I've always believed, you know, doing 40 Days for Life, getting involved in personally participating in the pro-life movement. This is what we're really good at, getting people out for the very first time on pro-life issues, and rather than being an abstract issue, that making this a personal issue. And if you go and pray outside the abortion centers, you see, you know, sometimes forced abortions. We've seen medical waste trucks arrive. We've seen the grim reality of abortion, and that has woken people up. But also, you know, that you're personally, spiritually participating through prayer And this is something, that this is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And, there's a sense of powerlessness that, babies being killed in front of where you are. And there's not a huge amount that you can do. But we've really seen the power of prayer in the United Kingdom, and they're determined to ban the vigils with the most extreme methodology possible here. Suddenly we're getting this enormous international audience from all these bans, and the more we get persecuted, the more people we reach. And I think that's what's extraordinary. One lady getting arrested outside one of the abortion facilities, she's reached 200 to 300 million people with that story going viral internationally. So I'm sure that, is that the same in your life? The more that you've experienced persecution, the greater the spiritual fruits, and the more coverage you've got. And that's just the nature of the issue, nature of being involved in this work. It is you're going to attract attention. There's going to be things that happen, and it's a contentious topic, and that's what that if there's a fight in the playground at school, a lot of people draw attention to it. So is that the experience that you've had, that sort of controversy and actual persecution leads to kind of spiritual fruitfulness as well?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the Lord's, it's the paradox of the cross, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. And just with the laicization that happened in 2022, actually your ministry carries on regardless. And it seems, Priests for Life carries on. You're still the director, still doing pro-life work. And that's extraordinary. It's actually very, very positive. I was delighted to hear that. And it's very, very positive. And I've always thought, wow, the ministry that you're doing and the number of different initiatives and apostolates you started is absolutely extraordinary. So I just commend you, Father Frank. Thank you so much for the work that you've done. I guess you never plan on retiring. It's something that you're just going to keep. You're never going to retire. It's going to be, keep going. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Please rate and review our podcast. Please go to 40daysforlifeinternational.com and please continue to share our podcasts with others. We've got a wonderful international collection of leaders, of campaigns in so many different countries, and I'm in awe of what God has done through 40 Days for Life and continues to do. So thank you so much, Father Frank, for your support, for your encouragement. Thank you so much for your pro-life work and your witness. We're in awe of what you have done with Priests for Life, and please continue to keep up the good fight and the good work. You're inspiration to many of our leaders, and may God bless everything that you're doing at this time. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. Thank you so much, listeners, for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the podcast. Thank you, and have a good evening.
No te pierdas los podcasts de 40 días por la vida internacional con entrevistas, reportajes y testimonios de todo el mundo.
Don't miss our podcasts with interviews, news, and reports from around the world.